Welcome to the adventure of the stolen Albatross plans, a Sherlock Holmes adventure from the series Shadows of Empire. The unseen cases of Sherlock Holmes, playing in the year 1903. It is only now, with the recent declassification of certain sensitive Foreign Office documents, that these particular accounts of Mr. Sherlock Holmes's endeavors may at last see the light of day. For many years, these narratives comprised of my own reports, official communications, and indeed, personal letters exchanged with various governmental departments, have remained under lock and key, filed away from public scrutiny. They chronicle our investigations during those often precarious years between 1885 and the cataclysm of the Great War, a period when the British Empire, at its zenith, cast long and sometimes troubling shadows across the globe. Within these shadows, Holmes and I navigated a murky world of imperial politics and colonial intrigue, confronting secrets that could shake the foundations of British power. These are, then, some of the shadows of empire, the unseen cases of Sherlock Holmes, wherein we faced not only espionage and betrayal, but also the moral complexities of an empire grappling with its own vast reach. Let me begin this series of recollections with an affair that plunged us directly into the heart of such imperial anxieties. I shall now recount the adventure of the stolen Albatross plans. Chapter. A chill November fog, thick as any I had seen, swirled about Baker Street's lamps. Its ghostly tendrils probed even our sitting room's heavy curtains. Outside, the occasional rumble of a late cab passing over the greasy cobbles was the only sound to break the profound quiet. Holmes, pipe in hand, was lost in one of his impenetrable reveries, his brow furrowed, when the sharp, insistent clang of our doorbell echoed up from below. He looked up, his grey eyes suddenly alert. A summons, Watson, and of some urgency, if I am not mistaken. The hour is late for casual callers. Sherlock Holmes responded. Indeed, it was a liveried footman bearing a note on a silver salver. The missive was brief. Holmes glanced at it and passed it to me. It was an invitation, or rather, a command, to attend his brother Mycroft at the Diogenes Club without delay. We soon procured a hansom. Its wheels sloshed through the mire as it carried us to that curious institution in Pall Mall. Silence there was not merely golden, but rigorously enforced. The very air within seemed hushed. Footfalls were muffled by thick carpets, and any conversations were mere whispers. We were ushered into a private anteroom where Mycroft Holmes awaited us. He rose, a large, rather corpulent man, his greeting a slow inclination of the head, his expression one of considerable gravity. Sherlock, Dr. Watson, your promptness is appreciated. His voice was a low, sonorous rumble, perfectly suited to the hushed atmosphere of the club. The matter is of the utmost delicacy and national importance, replied Mycroft Holmes. He gestured towards two chairs, and as we seated ourselves, the faint scent of old leather and floor polish hung in the still air. Mycroft settled back, his fingers steepled, his gaze distant for a moment before focusing upon my companion. There has been a theft, Sherlock. Plans of a most secret and revolutionary nature have vanished from Farnborough. He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. The designs for the Albatross aircraft, responded Mycroft Holmes. I confess, the name meant little to me, but I saw Holmes lean forward, his eyes gleaming with sudden, intense interest. The soft hiss of the gas lamp above was the only sound for a moment. The Albatross, Mycroft continued, his tone grave, represents a significant leap in aeronautical engineering. It promises Great Britain unparalleled aerial surveillance. Imagine, gentlemen, an eye in the sky. It could observe enemy fleet movements, troop concentrations, and fortifications from such a distance and height as to be virtually undetectable. Possessing it ensures our continued imperial defense. Losing it to a rival power, he let the sentence hang, the implication clear and chilling, responded Mycroft Holmes. Mycroft shifted his considerable bulk, the leather of his chair creaking softly in the otherwise profound silence. But the danger is twofold. This elevates the crisis beyond even that immediate threat. The Albatross is an aeroplane, yes. However, its stolen schematics contain advanced design principles. These principles, particularly for lightweight structural engineering and radical engine efficiency, could be readily adapted by, shall we say, the German Imperial Navy. Their Zeppelin airships, already a concern, could become significantly more formidable, faster, and capable of longer ranges. These plans offer them a path to enhance both their new aeroplane development and their existing airship superiority. This poses a direct, accelerated threat to our naval dominance. Holmes remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed upon his brother. The implications, even to my less specialized mind, were staggering. The fate of empires, it seemed, could now hang upon a sheaf of stolen papers. When were they taken, Mycroft? And by whom is it suspected? His voice was quiet, but sharp with focused intensity, stated Sherlock Holmes. Sometime within the last 48 hours. As to suspects, the field is regrettably open, though suspicion naturally falls upon those with access. The matter requires your unique talents, Sherlock. Official channels are, as ever, ponderous. They tend to alert the very parties we wish to keep in the dark, replied Mycroft Holmes. Indeed, a ghost of a smile touched Holmes's lips, though his eyes remained serious. He rose, a sudden, decisive movement. The game, as they say, is afoot, Mycroft, and the stakes have seldom been higher. You may consider me engaged upon the case, Sherlock Holmes responded. The weight of his words filled the quiet room. Outside, the fog seemed to press closer, a tangible manifestation of the unseen dangers now threatening the empire. I knew then our sojourn in Baker Street was at an end. A path fraught with peril and international intrigue lay immediately before us. The journey to Farnborough had been swift, a testament to the urgency conveyed by Mycroft's summons. Now, standing before the main workshop, a chill wind whipped about us, carrying the faint, metallic scent of industry and damp earth. Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood, a man whose stern countenance seemed etched by equal parts patriotism and frustration, met us at the entrance. The rhythmic clang of a distant hammer upon anvil punctuated the otherwise bleak quiet of the aerodrome. His voice was a low growl, tight with controlled anger. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, a damnable business. The nation's security compromised, right under my nose, responded Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood. He led us towards a large, hangar-like structure. Its main doors stood slightly ajar, hinting at a cavernous interior shrouded in shadow. The scrape of the heavy door as Air Commodore Blackwood pushed it further open echoed unnervingly within. Once inside, the air struck us cold and still. It was thick with the smell of oil and cut timber, and beneath that, a lingering, acrid odor I could not immediately place. The vast space lay in chaos. Tools scattered the floor, drawers gaped open, and an overturned drafting table spilled its contents across the dusty concrete. My companion wasted no time, his sharp and alert gaze sweeping the scene. "The point of entry, Commodore," he inquired, his tone brisk, explained Sherlock Holmes. "A side window, prized open." "Crude but effective," Blackwood replied, his voice tight with displeasure. He directed our attention to a shattered pane near the far wall. As he stepped towards it, the crunch of broken glass under his boot was sharp in the silence, said Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood. Holmes moved with that peculiar, feline grace of his keen observation missing nothing. He first knelt by the forced window, examining the frame minutely with his pocket lens. Then he shifted his attention to the overturned table. His long fingers sifted delicately through the scattered papers and blueprints. I could hear the soft rustle of the documents as he inspected them. For several minutes, The workshop was filled only with the sounds of Holmes's quiet movements and the distant, mournful sigh of the wind through some unseen crack in the structure. "Tell me, Commodore," Holmes murmured, his eyes still fixed on the scene, "where were the Albatross plans kept?" "Surely not among this general clutter," declared Sherlock Holmes. Blackwood stiffened, his voice strained. "Secured, Mr. Holmes, in a locked cabinet, or so I believed." He then guided our gaze to a heavy steel cabinet nearby. Its door hung askew, the lock visibly forced. Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood answered. Holmes approached the violated cabinet. He did not touch it immediately. Instead, he crouched low, his nose almost to the floor, sniffing the air delicately like a hound on a scent. After a moment, he produced a small envelope from his pocket. With infinite care, he scraped something dark and viscous from the edge of the cabinet's damaged lock plate into the waiting envelope. I could clearly see a faint, greasy smear upon the metal where his attention had been focused. "Interesting," he remarked, his voice thoughtful. "A specialized lubricant, I fancy. Not commonly found in your average toolkit, Watson. Observe its consistency, and do you see that slight greenish tinge?" declared Sherlock Holmes. He rose then. His gaze drifted around the workshop once more, eventually settling upon a particular spot near the overturned drafting table. He stooped, and his fingers deftly picked up a tiny, almost invisible fragment from the floor. He brought it to his nose, and as he inhaled its scent, I saw a flicker of understanding cross his features. "And this," he announced, his voice holding a new note of certainty, "confirms my suspicion. The faint but distinct aroma of a Bavarian cigar. Quite a rare blend, and favored, I believe, by certain gentlemen in the attaché circles of a particular embassy," explained Sherlock Holmes. A deeper shadow seemed to cross Air Commodore Blackwood's already grim features at Holmes's words. The implications were stark, and the silence in the workshop grew heavy, charged with unspoken fears. He spoke with a sudden, harsh clarity. "German agents, here," remarked Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood. "The evidence strongly suggests a visitor with specific skills and tastes, Commodore," Holmes replied, and I noted a familiar, keen glint in his eyes. A sophisticated grease for a delicate task, and the calling card of a connoisseur of fine, and specifically German, tobacco. Our thief was no common housebreaker. This was a professional, and one with connections, I dare say, to Berlin, replied Sherlock Holmes. The Commodore clenched his fists, the sound of his knuckles cracking a small, sharp report in the stillness. The theft was no longer merely a breach of security. It was an act of international espionage, played out on British soil. Holmes, however, seemed energized by the revelation, his mind already racing ahead. "We must ascertain who had knowledge of these plans, and who amongst them might possess continental sympathies, or perhaps pressing financial needs," Holmes mused, almost to himself, his voice taking on a distant quality that suggested his mind was already miles away. "The game, Watson, has most certainly begun," declared Sherlock Holmes. With those words, the cold workshop seemed to shrink, the shadows deepen, and the true gravity of our investigation settled upon me. The scent of Bavarian tobacco and the image of that peculiar grease were now indelibly linked in my mind to a threat far greater than mere theft. Following the revelations at the Diogenes Club, Holmes pursued the most immediate thread. Our hansom clattered over greasy cobbles, the horses' hooves a somber rhythm to my bleak thoughts on the stolen Albatross plans. We alighted before a grim-faced lodging house. A chill wind whistled down a nearby alleyway, carrying the clang of a distant smithy and the mournful cry of a costermonger. We ascended 3 flights of creaking, uncarpeted stairs, the air thick with boiled cabbage and damp wool. Holmes, his patience thinning, rapped sharply upon a door marked R. Thorne. After a protracted shuffling from within, the door creaked open a mere crack, revealing a pale, anxious face. The heavy silence was punctuated only by the insistent tick-tock of a cheap clock and the distant rumble of city traffic, amplifying the man's distress. "Mr. Reginald Thorne, I presume," deduced Sherlock Holmes. The man flinched at Holmes' words. "I am Sherlock Holmes, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson. We are here regarding the unfortunate matter at Farnborough," Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. He ran a trembling hand through his hair. When he finally spoke, his voice was a thin, strained whisper, compelling me to lean forward. "Yes, yes, of course. Please come in, though I fear I cannot offer much in the way of comfort," replied Mr. Reginald Thorne. Holmes's keen grey eyes swept the room. He noted the stack of unpaid bills skewered on a letter spike, then observed the engineer's restless, ink-stained fingers drumming on the table and twisting a loose button. I, too, observed the threadbare rug and empty grate. A chill draught whistled softly through an ill-fitting window frame, making me draw my coat tighter. The Albatross, Mr. Thorne. A revolutionary design, I understand, capable of feats hitherto considered impossible, Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. A flicker of something akin to pride, an artist's love for his creation, I fancied, passed across Thorne's features, only to be swiftly extinguished by a wave of anxiety. His voice, however, gained a little more substance as he spoke of his work, a brief respite from his evident fear. She was magnificent, a machine to grant Britannia dominion of the skies. The structural engineering, the engine efficiency, years of my life, gentlemen," replied Mr. Reginald Thorne. Holmes nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering, a look I knew well that often unnerved even the most hardened individuals, let alone a man as frayed as Thorne. "And the security surrounding these invaluable plans. Tell me of that," Sherlock Holmes noted. Thorne paled further. He picked up a pencil, its restless rolling a faint, grating sound in the tense quiet. The clock ticked on, each beat a hammer blow against his composure. The workshop was locked, naturally. The plans themselves were kept in a new Milner safe. Only myself, Air Commodore Blackwood, and his direct adjutant had keys, or so I believed. The night they were taken, I was working late. I stepped out for no more than 20 minutes to a local chop house. "When I returned," responded Mr. Reginald Thorne. His voice trailed off, heavy with remembered shock, and I saw Holmes lean forward slightly, his expression one of that intense, almost predatory concentration he reserved for moments when the scent of the truth was keenest. "Mr. Thorne, your devotion to your work is palpable. Yet it is equally apparent to me that you are laboring under considerable financial distress. Those notices upon your mantelpiece speak volumes, as does the chill in this room. A man of your intellect and skill should not find himself in such straits," deduced Sherlock Holmes. Thorne stared, utterly broken, seeming to shrink into himself. He gestured towards the bills, his voice a mere croak that elicited a pang of pity even, I judged, from Holmes. "Debts, investments that went sour. My stipend from the project was insufficient to cover them. I have been under immense pressure, sir. Creditors at the door, threats," remarked Mr. Reginald Thorne. Holmes's tone, though still firm, now carried a hint of understanding, a calculated measure of empathy, I suspected, designed to draw out the full confession. "Pressure can make a man consider actions he would otherwise deem unthinkable. Your complete candor, Mr. Thorne, is essential if we are to recover these plans, and perhaps extricate you from the more perilous aspects of your current predicament," replied Sherlock Holmes. Thorne buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. A stifled sob, quickly suppressed, was the only sound. When he looked up, his eyes were haunted with a despair I had seldom encountered. "There was an offer, a few weeks ago, from a gentleman, foreign, I believe. He expressed an interest in my general aeronautical theories, offered a substantial sum for private consultation. I refused, of course, but he was persistent. He knew of my difficulties, responded Mr. Reginald Thorne. Holmes and I exchanged a significant glance. We took our leave, our footsteps echoing on the bare wooden stairs. Outside, the damp London air felt almost refreshing. As a distant carriage rattled past, Holmes paused at the curb, his gaze distant, already piecing together the puzzle. Our engineer is a man walking a tightrope, Watson, with vultures circling. This foreign gentleman bears closer examination. It seems the web of espionage may have more visible strands than we initially supposed. Our next step must be to identify this interested party, declared Sherlock Holmes. After Farnborough, the faint scent of Bavarian tobacco still on my tweed, Holmes announced a change of scene. The shift from espionage to Mayfair's opulence was jarring, but I trusted his methods. A crisp afternoon found our hansom delivering us to a grand residence. A liveried footman led us into an exquisite drawing-room. Sunlight danced through leaded panes onto Persian rugs and mahogany, a far cry from the ransacked workshop. Lilies and beeswax scented the air, punctuated by the gentle tick of a mantel clock. Lady Beatrice Foxglove rose, a figure of composed elegance. Her silver-threaded hair was perfectly styled, her intelligent eyes commanding respect. A subtle rustle of silk marked her movement. She was the society Diogenes Holmes described, and I wondered what insights she could offer our investigation. Her voice, clear and musical, welcomed us. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, an unexpected pleasure. To what do I owe this visit? I trust it is not another tiresome charity bazaar you wish me to patronize, responded Lady Beatrice Foxglove. Holmes offered a slight bow, his polite deference barely masking his intensity. Your patronage, Lady Beatrice, is sought for a pressing national concern, though the methods may seem unconventional. We seek information not found in official reports, replied Sherlock Holmes. Lady Beatrice gestured to plush armchairs, a knowing smile on her lips. The clink of approaching tea service underscored the civility. It was a stark contrast, I mused, to our grave mission. Holmes, however, navigated these social currents with his usual admirable ease. Intriguing, Mr. Holmes. My drawing-room often hears whispers that never reach Whitehall. Pray, enlighten me. What information eludes even your astute grasp? Replied Lady Beatrice Foxglove. We are investigating the theft of certain sensitive aeronautical designs, Holmes stated, his gaze steady. Designs of great importance to the Crown. We suspect foreign agents, specifically German, replied Sherlock Holmes. I observed Lady Beatrice closely. Her polite smile remained, but a new alertness sharpened her eyes. She sipped her tea, the cup clicking softly. Holmes's words had clearly struck a chord. I felt that familiar anticipation. We were on the scent. Aeronautics, you say, fascinating yet perilous, and German agents. Her voice lowered conspiratorially. There's been talk, of course. One name keeps surfacing, linked to an unusual passion for flight, answered Lady Beatrice Foxglove. Indeed, Holmes leaned forward, his voice a low, encouraging murmur. And this name, Lady Beatrice, Sherlock Holmes pointed out. Baroness Hilda von Sturmer, she replied, her tone carefully neutral. A recent arrival from Berlin, a darling of embassy circles. Beautiful, charming, and reportedly far sharper than she appears. Her interest in aviation, especially British advancements, is noted as quite pronounced for a lady of fashion, Lady Beatrice Foxglove said. Holmes sat back. I saw a flicker in his keen eyes' triumph, or the satisfaction of a piece fitting into place. The name, Baroness Hilda von Sturmer, hung in the perfumed air, charged with significance that made me shiver. Even the mantel clock's ticking seemed louder, marking time towards a pivotal confrontation. Pronounced, you say, he mused thoughtfully. And her companions, Lady Beatrice. Does she associate with engineers or military men beyond typical diplomatic circles? Sherlock Holmes noted. She is often seen with attachés, naturally. As for engineers, I cannot say for certain, but she admires men of science and progress. She hosted a salon last week on the future of travel. Several from the Royal Aeronautical Society were, I believe, present. Her words were measured, each a carefully placed piece of a puzzle, responded Lady Beatrice Foxglove. Holmes rose, and I followed, a quiet satisfaction within me. Lady Beatrice's subtle information was the kind of nuanced lead Holmes excelled at uncovering. I was always amazed how he found vital clues in varied settings. This Mayfair drawing room had yielded a thread as crucial as any from a crime scene. Lady Beatrice, your assistance has been invaluable, he said sincerely. You have provided a most promising thread. Baroness Hilda von Sturmer. We shall certainly try to meet her, or at least understand her pronounced interests more fully, Sherlock Holmes noted. As we left, the front door closing with a soft thud, London's afternoon traffic enveloped us hooves, a distant newsboy's cry. I glanced at Holmes, his sharp profile against the bustling city, waiting eagerly. I knew his mind was already racing, processing Lady Beatrice's words and charting our next course. "Well, Watson," he remarked, with clear anticipation. The Bavarian tobacco pointed east, and now society's whispers give us a name and a face. A German baroness keen on aviation and influential friends. Our investigation, I fancy, is about to take a more social turn, Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. Following our unsettling interview with Mr. Thorne, Holmes relapsed into profound silence, sifting the Albatross affair. "It was the curious ash, Watson," he announced suddenly the following afternoon. "From that distinctive Bavarian cigar near Thorne's lodgings that set my thoughts on a certain track." His words broke the quiet of our Baker Street rooms, where rain pattered against the window panes. His voice was brisk, full of renewed purpose. "Such tobacco is favored by a particular clientele and not widely available. Its primary London purveyor supplies but a handful of establishments, chief among them the Olympian Club in Pall Mall. It is there, I suspect, we may find a thread to this conspiracy," replied Sherlock Holmes. That evening found us ascending the steps of the Olympian Club. Its imposing Portland stone facade exuded unassailable exclusivity. Holmes, with his usual knack, secured our entry effortlessly. I followed as a liveried attendant ushered us through heavy oak doors, which closed with a muted thud, sealing us within. Within, hushed opulence reigned. From the bar came the discreet clink of glasses, while newspapers rustled in the reading room. Confidential conversations hummed, forming a subtle symphony of privilege. Mahogany paneling gleamed under gasoliers. The air was thick with expensive leather, fine brandy, and as Holmes predicted, the unmistakable aroma of Bavarian cigar smoke. We found a secluded alcove with a clear view of the main smoking lounge. Soon, Holmes's elbow nudged my ribs. His intense gaze was fixed upon a woman across the room, a figure of undeniable poise, her dark silk gown shimmering, a brilliant diamond at her throat. "Baroness Hilda von Sturmer," he murmured, his voice barely a breath against the ambient hum. "Our German socialite with a pronounced interest in aviation, if you recall Mycroft's initial briefing. She conversed animatedly, though seemingly light-heartedly, with two gentlemen. One, portly with an impressive mustache, I recognized as Air Commodore Blackwood, a chilling realization. The other, slighter, with a keen, watchful expression, was unknown to me. The Baroness's melodious laughter carried faintly, yet her eyes held a sharp intelligence belying her easy charm. "Blackwood himself, Holmes," I whispered, aghast. "And his companion, he seems foreign," responded Dr. John Watson. His lips curved into a grim smile. "Indeed. The other, Watson, is Major von Klossner, assistant military attaché to the German embassy. His official duties, I am informed, often extend into less conventional avenues of information gathering." Note Blackwood's deference, how intently he listens when the Baroness speaks. Her influence appears considerable, Sherlock Holmes noted. We watched the trio converse for some time. Their words were lost amidst the club's drone, but their mannerisms spoke volumes. The Baroness, captivating and in command. Blackwood, enthralled. Von Klossner, ever observant, his gaze periodically sweeping the room. The Bavarian connection was no longer supposition. It was palpable reality. Our Baroness, Holmes stated quietly, eyes fixed on the group, is more than a charming enthusiast of flight. She is a nexus, Watson, a conduit. Through her, I believe, the Albatross plans have taken wing towards Berlin, stated Sherlock Holmes. As the trio rose to depart, von Klossner offered the Baroness his arm with a distinct, formal continental bow. This gesture solidified Holmes's assertion. The path ahead led into diplomatic intrigue. I knew, with familiar anticipation, our next steps would take us deeper into the shadows of international espionage. The morning after our illuminating conversation with Lady Beatrice Foxglove found Holmes in a state of intense, almost feverish activity. Our Baker Street rooms were pungent with the acrid odor of chemical reagents, the occasional soft clink of glass against glass accompanying his work. He was hunched over his makeshift laboratory bench, a small phial of dark, viscous oil held up to the gaslight, its flame hissing softly in the otherwise quiet room. His voice, when he finally spoke, was sharp with discovery. Watson, observe this residue. Found, you recall, on the discarded rag near the Farnborough workshop perimeter. Not merely machine oil, my dear fellow. This is something altogether more specific, Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. He gestured towards a microscope, the brass gleaming under the light. I peered through the eyepiece as instructed, though the smear on the slide meant little to my untrained eye. The quiet of the room was momentarily disturbed by a low rumble from a passing dray cart on Baker Street, its vibrations traveling through the floorboards. The properties of this substance, its refractive index, its behavior under heat, and the unique metal particles within all point to one conclusion, he continued, his eyes gleaming. It is, Watson, a specialized lubricant, one used almost exclusively in the engines of German Zeppelins, remarked Sherlock Holmes. Zeppelins, I exclaimed, straightening up. But what connection could there be between those aerial behemoths and the Albatross aeroplane? Responded Dr. John Watson. Holmes offered a thin smile. With a slight scrape of glass and metal, he swept aside a collection of chemical apparatus to make space for a large roll of schematics copies, I presumed, of the stolen Albatross plans. He spread them across the table, the crisp paper crackling in the otherwise profound silence of his concentration. Precisely the question I have been pondering, Watson. The Albatross is an aeroplane, true, but consider its key innovations. Look here. He tapped a section depicting a remarkably compact engine, a powerful yet compact engine, more efficient than anything we currently possess. And these structural components, they are made from a new metal, incredibly light yet exceptionally strong. Furthermore, note these reinforced fittings and channels, clearly designed for advanced spy cameras and observation gear, replied Sherlock Holmes. He paused, his finger tapping the schematics lightly, his keen eyes fixed upon me, ensuring I grasped the implications. The scent of his strong tobacco, recently smoked, still clung to the air, mingling with the faint chemical odors. Individually, these are marvels for an aeroplane. But taken together, Watson, consider how they could transform an airship. Those engines could make a Zeppelin fly much further and faster. The light, strong frame would allow it to carry a heavier load, more fuel, perhaps, or more equipment, or to reach higher altitudes. And picture those advanced cameras, mounted on the steady platform of an airship, gazing down upon our fleet or our cities. To confirm these technical suppositions, Holmes declared we must visit the Royal Aeronautical Society. Within the hour, we stood before its imposing facade. As we entered, the bustle of London fell away, replaced by hallowed, hushed halls. The air hung thick with the scent of old paper and floor wax, a scholarly perfume that seemed to demand whispers, and the distant, rhythmic clang of metal upon metal from a nearby workshop was barely audible above the quiet murmur of scholarly pursuit. We were shown into the office of a Mr. Silas Finch, a leading expert in aeronautical engineering, a man with a keen, bird-like visage and spectacles perched precariously on his nose. Holmes, with his customary directness, laid out his theory concerning the Albatross designs and their potential adaptability to Zeppelin technology, omitting, of course, any mention of the theft. Mr. Finch listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration, the only sound the gentle ticking of a clock on his mantelpiece. When Holmes concluded, he leaned back, his voice thoughtful. "Remarkable, Mr. Holmes. Quite remarkable. The applications you outline, they are entirely feasible. Indeed, a Zeppelin incorporating such advancements, powerful engines for longer flights, a lighter frame to carry more fuel or even weaponry, and those advanced observation systems, it would make Zeppelins vastly more capable. It could, forgive the term, revolutionize their effectiveness in both reconnaissance and, dare I say, offensive roles," remarked Mr. Silas Finch. His words, delivered with quiet authority, hung heavy in the air. The confirmation was chilling. We thanked Mr. Finch for his invaluable insights. The sound of our footsteps echoed slightly as we departed the quiet sanctity of the society, soon to be replaced by the cacophony of London streets, the rumble of omnibuses, the cries of street vendors, and the clip-clop of countless hooves as we re-emerged into its ceaseless activity. Once back in the relative privacy of a hansom cab, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones a familiar rhythm, Holmes spoke, his tone grave. "So, you see, Watson, the theft of the Albatross plans is a matter of far greater import than even Air Commodore Blackwood imagines. It is not merely the future of British aeroplane development at stake, but potentially the advent of a new, formidable Zeppelin threat," stated Sherlock Holmes. The implications were indeed staggering. The Albatross, designed to give Britain an eagle's eye view of its empire, could now provide its adversaries with the wings of a far more menacing vulture. The enigma of the stolen plans had deepened, its tendrils reaching further than I could have ever conceived. Mycroft's summons, characteristically laconic and urgent, spoke of suspicious cargo shipments and clandestine activities in Kent, suggesting a German hand. Holmes and I were soon in a hired motorcar, the grey light of a blustery autumn morning casting long shadows on desolate roads towards the coastal marshes. A biting wind whipped the canvas roof, carrying the sea's faint, briny tang. Mycroft's tendrils, Watson, reach into the most unexpected corners. When he signals alarm regarding national security, especially concerning aerial developments, we must assume the gravest import. Sherlock Holmes responded. "We met Air Commodore Alistair Blackwood at a lonely crossroads, a stark figure, his face grim and etched with impatience. As we proceeded on foot across Romney Marsh, the air filled with the cries of gulls and sighing reeds, our boots sinking into the damp earth. Blackwood, I sensed, preferred clear military command to covert ambiguities. I trust this excursion will prove more fruitful than a wild goose chase, Holmes. My time is not idly spent," replied Air Commodore Alistair Blackwood. Holmes merely inclined his head, his gaze sweeping the horizon. He first spotted the anomaly, a crudely leveled stretch of ground, half concealed in a shallow depression and marked by a dilapidated, out-of-place shepherd's hut. Then a new sound reached us, a peculiar, intermittent mechanical spluttering, cutting through the marsh's natural chorus. "Good heavens, Holmes," I murmured, my voice barely audible above the wind. "What is that place?" asked Dr. John Watson. "Patience, gentlemen. I believe our quarry is about to reveal itself." observed Sherlock Holmes. From behind the hut, a bizarre contraption was wheeled into view. A skeletal framework of wood and canvas, unsettlingly resembling the albatross designs Thorne had described. After violent engine coughs, the machine lurched forward, gathering speed jerkily before lifting unsteadily. It flew with a terrifying wobble, clearly a raw, untested prototype. Its engine note was a rough, uneven gasp against the sky. Beside me, Air Commodore Blackwood drew a sharp, incredulous breath. "Impossible, here, on British soil," replied Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood. Holmes had already raised his powerful field glasses, his lean form utterly still as he focused on the struggling aircraft. His brow furrowed in concentration, lips pressed into a thin, hard line. Though the wind tugged fiercely at his coat, he remained unmoved, a statue of focused intellect against the wild backdrop. "Observe, Commodore. The engine mounting, a direct, if crude, copy of the Albatross's unique nacelle design. Note the tail assembly, the specific rudder and elevator configuration. These are not coincidences. They are elements Thorne admitted sketching. The Germans, gentlemen, are not merely holding plans, they are testing a functional, if primitive, replication." Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. Holmes's words hung in the cold air, heavy with implication. The crude aircraft, after a brief, perilous circuit, landed with a jarring bump, thankfully intact. We could discern faint figures hurrying towards it. The audacity of conducting such experiments under our very noses was breathtaking. "This is an act of war. I shall have every man jack of them arrested. The area surrounded," responded Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood. "Patience, Commodore. A discovered hornet's nest is best dealt with strategically, not merely swatted. We now possess undeniable proof of their activities and their alarming progress. Our next move must be calculated, precise, and devastating," remarked Sherlock Holmes. A cold dread settled upon me, colder than the marsh wind, which now seemed to whisper of imminent conflict. Holmes's measured words promised a deeper, more perilous engagement. The flight of this deceptive machine had irrevocably altered our investigation, and indeed, the Empire's security. The cab's wheels clattered on wet stones as it departed, leaving us before Scotland Yard's grey facade. A chill drizzle fell. Inside, Inspector Lestrade met us in an echoing stone corridor, his footsteps heavy. He led us to a bleak interrogation room. A table, 3 chairs, and a single gas lamp hissing softly, its flame casting dancing shadows. Mr. Thorne sat hunched there, utterly dejected, pale, eyes bloodshot, attire disheveled. His voice was a low rumble, edged with his usual impatience. "He's been a tough nut, this one, since we brought him in, Mr. Holmes. Won't give us so much as a blink. Just stares at that wall, he does. Proper stubborn," remarked Inspector Lestrade. Holmes merely nodded, his keen gaze sweeping over the engineer before taking a seat opposite Thorne. I positioned myself slightly to one side, notebook at the ready. The silence hung heavy, punctuated only by the distant clatter of a typewriter and the rhythmic tick of a clock echoing down the hall. "Mr. Thorne," Holmes began, his tone unexpectedly gentle yet edged with authority, "we are not here to pass premature judgment. We seek only to understand the truth of the Albatross plans. Your cooperation would be most advisable," stated Sherlock Holmes. Thorne flinched but remained silent, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. Holmes waited patiently for a moment, then continued, his voice hardening slightly. "Your financial distress is no secret, sir, nor is your unparalleled access to the schematics. These are facts, Mr. Thorne, hard, immutable facts," Sherlock Holmes said. A choked sob escaped Thorne. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The sound was raw, painful to hear. His words came out in a torrent, muffled and anguished. I didn't give them everything. Not the full plans, never, just some calculations. Data on engine efficiency, certain structural stress points. They said it was for commercial application to improve their airships, Mr. Reginald Thorne said. He looked up, eyes pleading. The debts, they were crushing me. My family, I thought I could provide small details, things that wouldn't compromise the Albatross itself. And who, Mr. Thorne, are they? Holmes inquired, his voice now sharp as a razor, declared Sherlock Holmes. He stammered. A man, he called himself Fisher. German, I believe. He was very persuasive, offered a sum I couldn't refuse. He swore it was not for military purposes against England, replied Mr. Reginald Thorne. Lestrade grunted skeptically. Holmes, expression unreadable, remained focused on Thorne. As Thorne fell into an exhausted silence, Holmes rose. He paced the small room, the rhythmic tap of his shoes on the bare floorboards the only sound for a long minute. He stopped before Lestrade, his voice clear and decisive. His account, I believe, is largely true, Inspector. He is a desperate man, not a master spy. The information he describes, engine efficiencies, structural data, aligns perfectly with what would be invaluable for enhancing Zeppelin capabilities, as we discussed, Watson. However, it does not account for the theft of the complete, integrated Albatross designs, observed Sherlock Holmes. I saw comprehension dawn on Lestrade's face. Mr. Thorne here was a pawn, a supplier of specific components, likely exploited for his knowledge and his vulnerability. The theft of the full Albatross plans, the meticulously detailed blueprints of the entire aircraft, that was the work of another hand, Lestrade, a far more cunning and audacious individual. Our Mr. Fisher, or whatever his true name may be, likely orchestrated this smaller transaction, but the grand prize was secured by someone else. Sherlock Holmes noted. A familiar fire gleamed in Holmes's eyes. The hunt, far from over, had grown more complex. The room's damp chill and the steady hiss of the gas lamp seemed less oppressive, replaced by the invigorating prospect of a new chase. He added, his voice resonating with conviction, "We have found a leak, gentlemen, but the main breach is yet to be discovered. And discover it we shall," Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. German enterprise had taken root on Kentish soil. The brazen assembly of Albatross components, right under our noses, cast a somber pall over our recent meetings. In Mycroft's austere Whitehall office, the counterstroke was prepared. The rhythmic tick of a grand clock measured the weighty silence. The air, heavy with the scent of old paper, also carried a faint metallic tang, the city's breath, drawn in through the tall window. His voice, usually a low rumble, possessed a certain gravitas. "The documents are prepared, Sherlock. They are detailed enough to entice, yet they contain subtle flaws. These flaws will ensure any machine built from them will prove disappointing." A dry cough punctuated his statement, answered Mycroft Holmes. "Precisely, Mycroft. The bait must appear entirely genuine," Sherlock Holmes responded. Holmes's eyes gleamed with familiar intellectual fire. "Baroness von Sturmer is no fool. She will scrutinize every detail. Our phantom Albatross must promise supremacy, then deliver only scrap metal and shattered hopes." And so the stage was set. Late that afternoon, Holmes and I took up our position in Regent's Park. The autumn sun cast long, melancholic shadows across the grass. The air was crisp, carrying the distant cries of children at play and the occasional rumble of carriage wheels on the outer drive. We sat upon a secluded bench, the faked schematics bound in an official-looking oilskin packet resting between us. In the expectant quiet, the rustle of dry leaves under the paws of a scurrying squirrel sounded unnervingly loud. "Are you certain she will come alone, Holmes?" I murmured. My gaze swept the thinning trees and scattered figures strolling along the paths. Wondered Dr. John Watson. He replied without turning his head, his voice low and steady. Our message specified discretion. The Baroness values her reputation and her liberty. She understands the risks of being caught negotiating for such sensitive material. "Ah, speak of the devil, Watson," explained Sherlock Holmes. Baroness Hilda von Sturmer approached. Her footsteps made a soft, crunching sound on the gravel path. She was a vision of composure and elegance. The gentle swish of her walking dress accompanied her unhurried grace, a small, inscrutable smile playing upon her lips. There was no sign of an escort, no furtive glance to suggest accomplices lurked nearby. Her voice was melodious, with just a hint of an intriguing foreign cadence. "Mr. Holmes, I presume, you are commendably punctual. The air here is invigorating, is it not?" Baroness Hilda von Sturmer answered. "Indeed, Baroness, especially when matters of national importance are at stake." He gestured to the packet. "I believe you will find this to be of considerable interest." Sherlock Holmes responded. The exchange was brief, almost businesslike. Her gloved fingers accepted the oilskin packet. For a moment, her sharp, intelligent eyes met Holmes's. Then, with a slight nod, she turned. Her gambit then unfolded with astonishing speed. As she took a step, her reticule slipped from her grasp. Its contents, a powder puff, a small mirror, a few coins scattered onto the path with a series of small, distinct clicks and clatters. "Oh, how clumsy of me!" she exclaimed. Her voice carried a note of perfectly pitched feminine dismay. Baroness Hilda von Sturmer said, as she bent to retrieve her belongings. A park groundskeeper, who had been raking leaves some distance away, moved with surprising speed to assist her. The rhythmic scrape of his rake ceased abruptly. Simultaneously, from the opposite direction, a nanny pushing a pram gave a sudden, sharp cry, pointing towards the boating lake as if at an accident. For a precious few seconds, our attention was split. When I looked back, the Baroness was thanking the groundskeeper, her composure restored. She then walked briskly towards a gate leading to a quieter, tree-lined street. The oilskin packet was nowhere in sight. His voice was sharp. It cut through my confusion. The groundskeeper, Watson, and the nanny, prearranged. A classic misdirection. She never intended to carry the plans herself beyond this point, explained Sherlock Holmes. We moved quickly, but it was too late. The groundskeeper had vanished into the shrubbery. The nanny, her alarm apparently false, was already some way off, pushing her charge at a hurried pace. The Baroness herself was just a retreating figure, disappearing into the urban maze. A distant clang of a closing iron gate echoed faintly. Back in the familiar confines of Baker Street, Holmes paced the floor, his footsteps echoing softly on the boards. The crackle of the fire provided a counterpoint to the city's evening hum filtering in from outside. There was no anger in his demeanor. Instead, he showed the keen focus of a chess master who has encountered an unexpectedly brilliant move. "Remarkable," he mused, his voice tinged with reluctant admiration. "She anticipated our surveillance, Watson. The dropped reticule was the signal," replied Sherlock Holmes. He paused, perhaps replaying the scene in his mind's eye before continuing. The groundskeeper was no groundskeeper, but an agent positioned for the handover. The nanny was a simple diversion to draw the eye. She secured the documents and was clear of them within seconds, explained Sherlock Holmes. Holmes shook his head slightly, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips as he considered her audacity. All the while, she appeared entirely flustered, then departed with an air of innocence. "The woman has a network and the cunning to use it with flawless precision," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. "So she has the false plans, then?" I asked. I was still picturing the scene in the park. Dr. John Watson added, "Indeed, and she believes them genuine. That, at least, is going according to plan." He stopped his pacing, his gaze fixed on some distant point. "But her escape, Watson, it tells us a great deal. We are not dealing with a mere opportunist. She is a highly skilled operative, resourceful and meticulously prepared. This chase is far from over. In fact, it may have just truly begun." declared Sherlock Holmes. The wind moaned a little in the chimney. I felt a shiver despite the warmth of the hearth. The Baroness had won this encounter, and the game, I sensed, had just become infinitely more dangerous. The chill of the Farnborough aerodrome seemed to seep into my very bones as we disembarked from our cab. A raw, persistent wind whipped across the flat expanse, its mournful cry a constant backdrop to the distant, intermittent roar of an engine being tested, and the sharp, metallic clang of work from within the cavernous hangars. Inspector Lestrade, his face grim, accompanied us. Holmes had been uncharacteristically silent since our interview with Thorne, but now, as we approached the main administrative building, his eyes glinted with a fierce, predatory light. His voice was low, but carried clearly above the moan of the wind. Our man, Watson, is not merely an opportunist like Thorne. He is the very architect of this grand betrayal, a figure of supposed unimpeachable loyalty. We are here to confront Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood, stated Sherlock Holmes. I confess, the name struck me with the force of a physical blow. Blackwood, the stern patriot, the driving force behind the Albatross. It seemed inconceivable. Lestrade merely grunted, his expression suggesting he too found the notion difficult to credit, yet placed his faith in Holmes's unerring instinct. We were shown into Blackwood's office, a large, somewhat austere room overlooking the airfield. Maps and diagrams adorned the walls. The ever-present moan of the wind outside the window panes served as a muted counterpoint to the faint scent of machine oil and damp wool that pervaded the air within. Air Commodore Blackwood rose from behind his substantial oak desk, his posture erect, his gaze sharp and questioning, though I thought I detected a subtle tightening around his lips. His tone was clipped, resonant with authority. Holmes, to what do I owe this unexpected visit? And with Inspector Lestrade in tow, has there been a development concerning the stolen plans? Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood replied. Indeed, Air Commodore, a most significant development, Holmes replied, his voice smooth as silk yet with an underlying edge of steel. We have identified the individual responsible for the comprehensive theft and dissemination of the Albatross designs, replied Sherlock Holmes. A heavy silence descended upon the room, broken only by the distant hum of machinery. Blackwood's eyes narrowed fractionally. Excellent news, he stated, though his voice lacked its earlier warmth. And who is this traitor? Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood replied. That traitor, Air Commodore, Holmes declared, his gaze unwavering, is yourself, explained Sherlock Holmes. Blackwood's face, a moment before composed, seemed to freeze. A faint tremor ran through his clasped hands. He emitted a short, sharp laugh, devoid of humor. Preposterous, Holmes, utterly preposterous. On what grounds do you base such an outrageous accusation? Air Commodore Alastair Blackwood replied. Upon a foundation of irrefutable facts, Blackwood, Holmes countered, his voice rising slightly in intensity. Thorne, your desperate engineer, sold partial information, yes, but the complete plans were beyond his reach. Only one with supreme authority could have orchestrated such a comprehensive theft. Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. Holmes paused, his gaze fixed on Blackwood, who shifted uncomfortably. The only sound for a moment was the distant thrum of activity from the airfield, a stark contrast to the tension coiling within the office. Your considerable gambling debts provided the initial motive of greed. Then there is your deep-seated resentment, often voiced in private, that your contributions were undervalued. You believed, did you not, that by providing these plans to a rival power, you might spur Britain towards a more aggressive stance? Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. Holmes paused, allowing his words to sink in. The Air Commodore's complexion had turned a ghastly shade of grey. His breath came in shallow rasps. Furthermore, Holmes continued, his voice like the flick of a whip, the timeline of your clandestine meetings, cleverly disguised as routine inspections or supplier consultations, aligns perfectly with the known movements of German agents. He took a step closer, and I could hear the faint rustle of papers as he perhaps gestured towards unseen notes, though his eyes never left Blackwood. The rhythmic tick of a large wall clock seemed to amplify the oppressive silence. And finally, the coded ledger discovered in Thorne's effects. It detailed payments not only to him, but larger sums to an entity designated Aquila, the Eagle, sir. A rather fitting, if arrogant, codename for the head of the Albatross project. Would you not agree? Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. Blackwood's composure shattered. His eyes darted wildly, like those of a trapped animal. With a strangled cry, he lunged towards a steel cabinet, fumbling with a key. Lestrade's voice boomed out, sharp and commanding. "Hold it right there, Blackwood. Don't even think about it," Inspector Lestrade answered. But the Air Commodore was beyond reason. He wrenched open a drawer, snatching at a bundle of papers within. A desperate scramble ensued. The sound of tearing paper, a heavy thud as a chair overturned, and Blackwood's harsh, panicked breathing filled the air as he made a desperate bid to reach the fireplace, intent on destroying the last vestiges of his treason. The hansom cab thundered through London's emptying streets, wheels striking sparks from cobbles as our driver, spurred by Holmes's urgent commands and a promised sovereign, urged his horse to a perilous pace. Gas lamps cast long shadows, and chill night air whipped our faces. Beside me, Holmes was taut concentration, his hawk-like profile silhouetted against fleeting city lights. We had learned, through deductions too swift for me to fully grasp, that Air Commodore Blackwood, entrusted with Britain's aerial future, was the traitor, racing to a clandestine meeting on the coast. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and clipped, cutting through the rhythmic clatter of hooves and iron-shod wheels. "The rendezvous point, Watson, will be one of the disused smuggling strips near Folkestone. Blackwood fancies himself a student of Napoleonic strategy. He'd appreciate the historical irony. And the tide will be out, offering a firm landing ground," explained Sherlock Holmes. I marveled at his mind's intricate workings, piecing together such a precise location from scant clues: a half-burned railway timetable, a past comment from Blackwood on coastal erosion. The city yielded to darkened countryside, the moon a pale disk in the inky sky. For a long while, only the drumming of our horses' hooves broke the silence, a desperate rhythm underscoring our urgent mission. After an age, and a change of horses at a sleepy coaching inn where Holmes's silver worked miracles, we reached a rutted coastal track. The air was heavy with salt, the distant sigh of waves on shingle audible. Ahead, a faint, flickering light against the dark expanse marked our destination. "There, Watson," he murmured, his eyes gleaming with a hunter's intensity. "Our quarry is close. Instruct the driver to wait here. We proceed on foot. Stealth is paramount," observed Sherlock Holmes. We disembarked into a profound silence, broken only by the loud crunch of our boots on gravel. Nearing the light, a storm lantern on an oil drum, a makeshift airfield opened before us. Silhouetted against moonlit clouds was a small aeroplane, its engine ticking softly. Nearby, two figures stood by a motorcar. A third, unmistakably Blackwood, approached them, a bulky satchel in hand. "Good heavens, Holmes," I whispered, my hand instinctively going to the revolver in my coat pocket. "We are only just in time," remarked Dr. John Watson. "Indeed. Those will be our German friends, no doubt," Holmes replied, his tone hardening. "Now, Watson, we must act with both speed and precision," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. Before I could respond, Holmes broke from the shadows, striding purposefully towards the group. "Air Commodore Blackwood." His voice rang out, sharp and commanding, startling the assembled figures. "I believe you have something that belongs to the crown." Blackwood spun around, his face, illuminated by the lantern, a mask of shock and dawning horror. The two other men, clearly foreigners by their attire, tensed, one reaching inside his coat. The satchel containing the Albatross plans slipped from Blackwood's nerveless fingers, falling to the ground. His voice was a strangled gasp. Holmes, but the meticulous nature of my plan. How could you possibly know? Responded Air Commodore Alistair Blackwood. Schnell, die Plen, one of the agents barked, his English heavily accented, lunging for the fallen satchel, said German Agent 1. Holmes was faster. He darted forward, intercepting the man with a deftly placed foot, sending him sprawling. The second agent drew a pistol, but before he could aim, I leveled my own. I should advise against that, sir, I called out, my voice steadier than I felt, commented Dr. John Watson. The first agent, recovering quickly, scrambled for the satchel. Blackwood, seemingly paralyzed, simply stared. A desperate struggle ensued. Holmes grappled with the first agent, the precious satchel skittering across the damp grass. I kept the second agent covered, the sea wind moaning. A grunt, the sickening thud of a fist meeting flesh. And then, to my horror, the first agent snatched the satchel. With surprising agility, he sprinted towards the aeroplane, its propeller already turning with a cough and sputter, kicked into life by an unseen accomplice in the cockpit. Holmes shouted, his voice strained above the rising noise of the engine. "Stop him, Watson. He must not reach that machine," Sherlock Holmes noted. The plans, the culmination of so much effort and the key to Britain's aerial supremacy, were mere yards from escaping. As the aeroplane's engine roared to life, the fate of the Albatross, and perhaps the Empire itself, hung precariously in the balance. The hansom deposited us before the familiar, imposing facade of the Diogenes Club. Within its hallowed halls, the silence was, as ever, a palpable entity, broken only by the faintest rustle of a distant newspaper or the muffled rhythm of hooves on Pall Mall filtering through the heavy draperies. The affair of the Albatross plans, culminating in the dramatic unmasking of Air Commodore Blackwood, had left a somber residue upon my spirits, and I sensed a similar contemplative mood in Holmes. We were ushered into a private room, where a fire glowed with a subdued warmth, casting flickering shadows upon the book-lined walls. Mycroft Holmes awaited us, his large frame comfortably settled into a wing-backed chair. He acknowledged our entrance with a slight inclination of his head. A decanter and glasses already placed upon a nearby mahogany table. His voice when he spoke was a low rumble, barely disturbing the stillness. "Sherlock, Dr. Watson, you will be seated. The recent agitation concerning Farnborough has, I am given to understand, been managed with minimal public disquiet," replied Mycroft Holmes. Holmes selected a chair opposite his brother, his lean figure a contrast to Mycroft's bulk. I took a seat nearby, observing the two remarkable siblings. "Blackwood's confession was comprehensive, I trust?" Holmes inquired, his tone devoid of triumph, merely seeking fact, declared Sherlock Holmes. "Assuredly. Avarice, compounded by a misguided patriotic imperative. He perceived Britain as faltering, fancying his actions might galvanize a more robust defense. Such are the rationalizations when ambition outstrips moral compass." Mycroft poured 3 small glasses of sherry, the liquid a dark amber in the firelight, remarked Mycroft Holmes. A heavy silence descended for a moment, punctuated only by the soft crackle of the fire. I considered the immense power the Albatross represented, a power that had so nearly fallen into the hands of a rival nation. "It is a sobering thought, the potential of such a machine," I ventured. "The advantage it offers is immense, but the temptation it creates," Dr. John Watson inquired. "Progress, Dr. Watson, is a relentless engine. It carries us towards an uncertain future laden with both promise and peril," responded Mycroft Holmes. He paused, swirling the sherry in his glass. "The Albatross is but one manifestation of this. Its existence will undoubtedly accelerate the efforts of others. Such is the nature of the game," remarked Mycroft Holmes. The crackling fire filled the silence as Holmes, his long fingers steepled, continued to stare into the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, yet carried an undeniable weight. This pursuit of aerial dominance, Mycroft, is a new frontier for your imperial calculations, yet the human element remains stubbornly consistent. Blackwood, Thorne, Van Sturmer, all caught in a web of ambition, loyalty, and fear. Technology may change. The frailties it exploits are timeless, remarked Sherlock Holmes. He rose and paced slowly before the hearth, the rhythmic tap of his shoes on the polished floorboards a soft counterpoint to the hushed atmosphere. We have, in this instance, preserved a secret, shored up a defense. But the underlying current, this insatiable desire for an often illusory advantage, continues. Each advancement to protect the empire also sows seeds of new conflicts, new betrayals, Sherlock Holmes said. His words painted a stark picture, one that extended far beyond the confines of the Farnborough workshop. The Albatross was not merely a machine. It was a symbol of an age teetering on the brink of transformations, both wondrous and terrifying. A burden, Sherlock, yet necessary. The alternative is ceding the future, a contingency we cannot afford. The price of vigilance is considerable, yet the repercussions of negligence are unthinkable, Mycroft Holmes said. And so the great game continues, Holmes murmured, pausing by the window to gaze out at the darkening London sky, where perhaps, one day, such machines as the Albatross would cast long shadows. We play our parts, Watson, striving to bring some small measure of order to the chaos. But the larger questions of progress, of empire, they remain etched against the horizon, remarked Sherlock Holmes. He turned back to the room, a flicker of his old energy returning to his eyes, though tempered with a profound weariness. The case was closed, the plans secured, but the echoes of the Albatross's stolen wings seemed to linger in the quiet air of the Diogenes Club, a testament to the complex and often perilous path of human endeavor.